Naji, was a civil servant who worked tirelessly to provide for his family, while her mother, Mama Nkechi, was a homemaker known for her wisdom and warmth. Growing up, Ada often watched her parents navigate life together. Her father was patient and kind, always putting the family first, while her mother was resilient and resourceful, ensuring that the household ran smoothly even during difficult times. Ada grew up watching her mother do all the household chores without any complaint, while her father worked long hours and still managed to make time for his family. Mama Nkechi taught Ada that a woman must be strong, beautiful, and independent, but Ada also saw her mother's exhaustion and the toll it took on her over the years. She decided early on that her life would be different. She wanted more. More excitement, more adventure, more luxury. She loved her parents dearly, but she promised herself that she wouldn't settle for a life of sacrifices like her mother had. When Ada met Tund at a friend's wedding, she thought she had found everything she was looking for. Tund was charming and successful, and treated her like a queen. He was the type of man who opened doors for her, pulled out her chair, and showered her with gifts. For Ada, it was like a dream come true. She was swept off her feet by his generosity and kindness, and within a year, they were married. Tund came from a well-to-do family in Lagos. His father, Chief Adebayo, was a respected businessman, and his mother, Lady Funmi, was known for her philanthropic work. Tund had been raised to be respectful, hardworking, and caring, values that he carried into his marriage with Ada. But after the wedding, Ada began to feel restless. The excitement of the courtship faded, and the reality of daily married life set in. Tund was a good man. He worked hard to provide for her, he was attentive and loving, but to Ada it all felt too ordinary. She missed the thrill of being pursued, the excitement of something new. She began to envy her friends, Chioma and Ifeoma, who seemed to have it all. They were married to good men as well, but they had something Ada felt she was missing: adventure. Chioma, like Ada, came from a humble background. Her father was a retired teacher, and her mother ran a small provision store. Chioma had always been ambitious. She worked hard to get into university and eventually landed a job in a prestigious law firm. She married Emeka, a gentle and supportive man who loved her deeply. Emeka was a pharmacist who owned a small pharmacy in Lagos. He was not as wealthy as Chioma had hoped, but he was stable, kind, and dependable. Despite this, Chioma found herself yearning for more excitement, more luxury, more freedom. Ifeoma, on the other hand, had always been the rebellious one among them. She came from a wealthy family. Her father was a successful contractor, and her mother was a fashion designer who owned boutiques in Lagos and Abuja. Ifeoma had grown up surrounded by luxury, and she had always been used to getting what she wanted. She married Chuka, a businessman who adored her and would do anything to make her happy. But for Ifeoma, the excitement of marriage wore off quickly. She missed the thrill of her single days, the freedom to do as she pleased without answering anyone. Every day, Ada meets up with Chioma and Ifeoma, and they discuss their marriages over coffee and brunch at a trendy cafe. Their conversations are always lively, filled with laughter and the latest gossip about their lives. Ada, Chioma, and Ifeoma spend hours chatting about their husbands, their frustrations, and the secret affairs that have filled their lives with excitement. Each of them has a lover, a man they believe is better than their husbands in every way. They text their lovers at all hours, smile at their phones, and take secret calls late at night. The thrill of these secret relationships excites them, and soon their marriages become nothing more than a charade. They manipulate their husbands to take on more household duties, making them cook, clean, and care for the children while they focus on themselves and their secret affairs. Tund, Emeka, and Chuka, husbands to Ada, Chioma, and Ifeoma respectively, are devoted men who want nothing more than to make their wives happy. Tund works long hours but still comes home and helps with household chores. He cooks Ada's favorite meals, runs errands, and does whatever he can to keep the peace. Emeka and Chuka are no different. They love their wives deeply and are willing to do anything to make their marriages work. But the more they give, the less their wives appreciate them. Ada's relationship with her lover, Kola, begins to consume her thoughts. Kola is everything she believes Tund isn't. Exciting, daring, and full of life. Kola takes her out to fancy restaurants, whispers sweet nothings in her ear, and fills her head with dreams of a better life. Ada begins to see Tund as nothing more than a boring man who lacks ambition. She starts treating Tund with disdain, yelling at him for the smallest mistakes and ordering him around as if he were a servant. Chioma and Ifeoma are no different. Chioma's lover, Femi, is charming and confident, and he makes her feel special in a way Emeka never could. Ifeoma's lover, Deli, is younger, full of energy, and always knows the right things to say. The three women are convinced that their lovers are superior to their husbands, and they begin to make plans to leave their marriages. They listen to their lovers' advice, ignoring their husbands' opinions and dismissing their feelings. The wives become increasingly cruel, belittling their husbands and demanding more from them. They see their husbands as nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. The men, unaware of their wives' affairs, continue to do everything they can to please them, hoping that their efforts will bring back the love that seems to have disappeared. As the days turned into weeks, Ada's affair with Kola deepened. Kola was a businessman with connections to high-end events, and he often took Ada along as his date. For Ada, it was everything she had ever dreamed of. Dinner parties at exclusive restaurants, luxury hotel getaways, and romantic weekends that felt like a fairy tale. She began to believe that Kola was her true love, the one who could give her the life she deserved. She would stare at her reflection in the mirror, dressed in designer gowns, and feel a thrill of satisfaction. She was living the life she had always wanted, far away from the mundane routine of her marriage. One night, Ada returned home late. The clock struck midnight as she tiptoed into the house, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She hoped Tund was already asleep. But as she reached the living room, she froze. Tund was sitting on the couch, his face illuminated by the dim light of a single lamp. His eyes were red, and his face was lined with exhaustion. "Ada, where have you been?" His voice cracked a mixture of sadness and desperation. Ada rolled her eyes, dropping her purse on the table. "Don't start, Tund. I was out with friends. You're always asking questions." "I'm worried about you, Ada," Tund replied, standing up. He moved closer, but Ada stepped back. "You've changed. You're distant, and you barely talk to me anymore." Ada sighed dramatically, her patience wearing thin. "I'm tired, Tund. I don't need this right now." She turned on her heel, walking away, leaving Tund standing there, his heart sinking further. Chioma, too, was becoming more engrossed in her affair with Femi. Femi was a lawyer who worked at a big firm in Victoria Island. He was confident and successful, and always knew how to make Chioma feel special. He would send her flowers to her office, take her out to fancy dinners, and shower her with compliments. Chioma felt alive when she was with Femi. She felt like the woman she had always wanted to be. Independent, desirable, and powerful. Emeka, her husband, was kind and loving, but he didn't excite her the way Femi did. She began to resent Emeka, seeing him as weak and unambitious. She wanted more out of life, and she believed that Femi could give it to her. One evening, Emeka decided to surprise Chioma. He had noticed how distant she had been lately and thought a romantic dinner might help rekindle their love. He spent the afternoon cooking her favorite meal: jollof rice, fried plantain, and spicy grilled fish. He set the table with candles, dimmed the lights, and waited for Chioma to come home. When Chioma walked in, she was on the phone with Femi, laughing at something he had said. She barely noticed the effort Emeka had put into the evening. "Chioma," Emeka called out softly, his eyes hopeful. "I made dinner for us. I thought we could spend some time together." Chioma glanced at the table, her smile fading. She put her hand over the phone and whispered, "Not now, Emeka. I'm busy." Without another word, she walked into the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. Emeka stood there, staring at the candlelit table, his heart breaking. He blew out the candles, the room plunging into darkness, the silence deafening. Ifeoma's affair with Deli was different. Deli was younger than Ifeoma, a carefree artist who lived life on his own terms. He was fun, spontaneous, and always knew how to make Ifeoma laugh. He would take her on long drives to the beach, where they would watch the sunset and talk about their dreams. Ifeoma loved the way Deli made her feel, young, carefree, and full of life. She began to pull away from Chuka, her husband, refusing to spend time with him or even talk to him. She saw Chuka as boring and old-fashioned, someone who was holding her back from truly living. One Saturday afternoon, Chuka suggested they spend the day together. "We could go to the park and have a picnic," he offered, trying to bridge the growing gap between them. Ifeoma barely looked up from her phone. "I have plans, Chuka," she said dismissively. She was already texting Deli, arranging their next meeting. Chuka watched her, his heart heavy with the realization that the woman he loved was slipping away from him. The three women began to make plans to leave their husbands. They talked about it during their brunches, laughing and dreaming about the lives they would have once they were free. Ada imagined herself traveling the world with Kola, living in luxury, and never having to worry about anything. Chioma dreamed of a life with Femi, where she would be respected and admired, not just as a wife, but as a powerful woman. Ifeoma fantasized about a carefree life with Deli, where she could do whatever she wanted without anyone holding her back. But as the women were making plans, their lovers were beginning to have doubts. Kola enjoyed his time with Ada, but he had never seen her as anything more than a fun distraction. He had no intention of leaving his girlfriend, who had been with him through thick and thin. Femi, too, was beginning to feel uncomfortable with Chioma's growing dependence on him. He liked the thrill of the affair, but he wasn't interested in a serious relationship. Deli, carefree as he was, had no desire to settle down with Ifeoma. He enjoyed their time together, but he wasn't looking for anything permanent. The women were oblivious to their lovers' doubts. They were convinced that they were making the right decisions and that their lovers were the ones who could give them the lives they deserved. They began to distance themselves more and more from their husbands, treating them with disdain and disrespect. The husbands, unaware of the affairs, continued to do everything they could to make their wives happy, hoping that their efforts would eventually pay off. Ada, Chioma, and Ifeoma all believed they were on the path to the lives they wanted. But reality had a different plan in store for them. Irritable, spending long hours at work and coming home late. The excitement that Chioma had once felt began to fade, replaced by a sense of emptiness. Irritable, spending long hours at work and coming home late. The excitement that Chioma had once felt began to fade, replaced by a sense of emptiness she couldn't shake. She began to see the cracks in the perfect fantasy she had built in her mind. It wasn't long before the reality of her decision began to sink in. One day, after an especially tense argument with Femi, Chioma cried alone in the bathroom. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, the tears streaming down her face. The glamorous life she thought she would have an illusion. Femi was not the man she thought he was. He was cold, distant, and uninterested in anything beyond their physical relationship. Chioma knew she had made a mistake. She packed her bags and returned to Emeka's house, hoping to find some semblance of the stability she had left behind. When she knocked on the door, Emeka opened it, his eyes filled with both shock and hurt. Chioma apologized, her voice cracking as she begged for another chance. Emeka, though deeply hurt, allowed her to step back into the house. He loved her despite everything, but he also knew that the road to repairing their marriage would be long and uncertain. For Ada, things had not turned out any better. After moving in with Kola, she began to see the real side of him, a man who was selfish and only interested in the thrill of their relationship. He began spending more time away from the apartment, leaving Ada alone and confused. It wasn't long before she realized that Kola had no intention of making her a permanent part of his life. Feeling abandoned and used, Ada decided to leave. She returned to Tun's house late one evening, her eyes filled with tears. She stood at the door, hesitant before finally knocking. Tund opened the door, his expression unreadable. He let her in, his heart torn between the love he still felt for her and the pain of her betrayal. Ada apologized profusely, promising that she had learned from her mistakes and wanted to make things right. Tund, ever the kind-hearted man, decided to give her another chance, although deep down, he knew it wouldn't be easy to forget what had happened. For a while things seemed to improve. Chioma tried her best to make amends with Emeka, and Ada worked hard to regain Tund's trust. They spent more time at home, cooked together, and even planned small weekend getaways to reconnect. Emeka and Tund both hoped that the worst was behind them, that their wives had truly changed. But old habits die hard. Despite their promises, Ada and Chioma soon found themselves slipping back into their old ways. The thrill and excitement of their secret affairs were like an addiction, one that was hard to shake. Ada found herself texting Kola again, her heart racing at the thought of rekindling the passion that had once consumed her. She convinced herself that it was harmless, that she was just talking to an old friend. But the texts soon became more frequent, and the lies she told Tund became more elaborate. Chioma, too, struggled to let go of her past. She missed the way Femi made her feel, powerful, desired, and in control. Emeka was kind and loving, but the excitement she craved was missing. She started meeting Femi for lunch, telling herself that it was just innocent catching up. But with each meeting, the pull of her old life grew stronger, and she found herself lying to Emeka once again. One Friday evening, Emeka came home to find Chioma dressed up, her makeup flawless and her hair perfectly styled. She claimed she was going out with friends, but Emeka knew better. He could see the distance in her eyes, the same look she had before she left him the first time. His heart sank, but he didn't say anything. He simply watched as she walked out the door, the silence of the house engulfing him once more. Meanwhile, Tund began to notice the changes in Ada. She was once again coming home late, her excuses growing weaker by the day. One evening, after she had left her phone unattended, a message from Kola flashed on the screen. Tund's heart pounded as he read the words, sweet nothings that confirmed his worst fears. Ada was back to her old ways, and the promises she had made were nothing but empty words. The trust that Tund and Emeka had tried so hard to rebuild began to crumble once again. Tund confronted Ada, his voice filled with both anger and heartbreak. Why, Ada? Why did you come back if you were just going to do this again? Ada looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. She had no answer, no justification for her actions. She had wanted the security of Tund's love, but she couldn't let go of the excitement that Kola brought into her life. It was as if she was trapped between two worlds, unable to fully commit to either. Emeka, on the other hand, chose a different approach. He stopped trying to make Chioma happy. He stopped cooking her favorite meals, stopped planning romantic evenings, and stopped trying to be the perfect husband. He realized that no matter what he did, it would never be enough. Chioma wanted something he couldn't give her, and he was done trying to compete with the fantasy she had built in her mind. Chioma noticed the change in Emeka. At first, she was relieved. His constant attempts to please her had begun to feel suffocating. But as the days turned into weeks, she began to feel the emptiness of their relationship. The man who had once adored her now barely looked at her. The warmth and love that had once filled their home was replaced by a cold, indifferent silence. One evening, as Chioma sat alone in the living room, she realized that she had lost something precious. She had wanted excitement, but in her pursuit of it, she had destroyed the stability and love that Emeka had offered her. She looked at her phone, the messages from Femi now feeling hollow and meaningless. She had traded a lifetime of love for moments of thrill, and now she was left with nothing. Ada, too, began to feel the weight of her choices. Tund had become distant, his laughter and warmth replaced by a guarded silence. He no longer looked at her with the same adoration, and she knew that it was her fault. She had broken something that could never be fully repaired, and now she was left to face the consequences of her actions. One stormy night, the tensions that had been building finally reached their breaking point. Tund sat in the dimly lit living room, the sound of thunder echoing in the background. Ada walked in, drenched from the rain, and froze when she saw the look on his face. There was no warmth, no kindness, only exhaustion and hurt. "We need to talk, Ada," Tun said, his voice barely audible over the storm outside. He gestured for her to sit, and she reluctantly did. "I can't do this anymore," he continued. "I gave you everything and I forgave you when you first broke my heart. But this is too much." Ada's eyes filled with tears, but Tund held up his hand to stop her. "I don't want your apologies. I wanted us to work, but I can't be the only one trying. You need to make a choice, Ada. Do you want this marriage or not?" Ada opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had spent so much time chasing the thrill of her affair with Kola that she hadn't realized what she was losing in the process. Tund shook his head, his eyes filled with a sadness that cut her to the core. "I love you, Ada, but I love myself too. And I can't keep hurting like this." Across town, Emeka and Chioma were having a similar confrontation. Emeka had reached his limit. He had tried to move on, to rebuild his life without Chioma, but her return had only brought more pain. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, his hands clasped together as he spoke. "Chioma, I don't know what else to do," he said, his voice trembling. "I wanted to believe that we could fix this, that you had changed. But I can see now that nothing is different. You're still chasing something that doesn't exist. And I can't keep pretending that I'm okay with it." Chioma looked at him, her heart aching. She had never seen Emeka so broken, and she knew that it was her fault. She had taken his love for granted, believing that he would always be there no matter what. But now, she realized that she had pushed him too far. "Emeka, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I never meant to hurt you. I got lost." Emeka shook his head, his eyes filled with tears. "It's too late for that, Chioma. I can't keep living like this, always waiting for the next time you'll leave or betray me. I deserve better." Chioma's heart sank as she watched Emeka stand up, his face set with a resolve she had never seen before. He walked to the bedroom and came back with a packed suitcase. "I think it's time for you to go, Chioma," he said, his voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill. Chioma's breath caught in her throat, her heart pounding. She had never imagined it would come to this. She had always thought that Emeka would forgive her, that he would always be there no matter what. But now, she realized that she had reached the end of the line. Chioma found herself standing in the rain, suitcase in hand, staring at the house that she had once called home. The door closed behind her, the finality of it echoing in her mind. She had nowhere to go. Femi had already moved on, uninterested in anything more than their fleeting affair. She had traded everything for a fantasy, and now she was left with nothing but regret. Ada too faced a similar fate. Tund packed his own bags that stormy night, leaving the house that had once been their shared dream. He had reached his breaking point, and he needed to find himself again, away from the lies and the betrayal. As he walked out the door, Ada felt the weight of her actions come crashing down on her. She had lost him, the one person who had loved her unconditionally. The lovers that Chioma and Ada had once believed would be their escape were nowhere to be found. Kola had moved on, uninterested in Ada now that the thrill was gone. Femi had already found someone new, leaving Chioma with nothing but memories of what could have been. The promises they had once made were empty, just like the homes they had destroyed with their own hands. Chioma spent her nights in a small rented room, the silence deafening as she replayed every mistake in her mind. She had thought she could have it all, the excitement, the thrill, the love, but she had ended up with nothing. The calls to Femi went unanswered, and the realization that she had been used and discarded hit her harder than she could have ever imagined. Ada too found herself alone. She tried reaching out to Kola, but he had already moved on, his interest in her fading the moment she had nowhere else to turn. She spent her days in the empty house, the walls echoing with memories of what she had lost. She had thought she was chasing happiness, but all she had found was heartbreak. The weeks turned into months, and the harsh reality of their choices began to sink in. Chioma watched as Emeka moved on with his life. He found solace in his work, in friends who supported him, and eventually in someone new. He deserved happiness, and Chioma knew that she was no longer part of that picture. Ada, too, saw Tund begin to rebuild his life. He found a new job in another city, away from the memories that haunted him. He deserved a fresh start, and he was determined to find it, even if it meant leaving everything behind. Chioma and Ada were left to face the bitter truth. They had destroyed their own happiness in search of something that had never truly existed. They had believed that the grass was greener on the other side, but now they were left with nothing but regret and the ruins of what they had once taken for granted. The thrill of their affairs had faded, and all that remained was emptiness. They had lost the men who had loved them, the homes they had built, and the futures they had once dreamed of. The lovers they had chased were gone, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. Months had passed since Chioma and Ada's worlds had come crashing down, leaving them with the aftermath of their choices. The emptiness they now faced was not just of their homes, but of their hearts and their spirits. It was a loneliness that stretched far beyond the absence of Emeka and Tund. It was a void born from their own decisions and mistakes. Chioma found herself sitting in a small, sparsely furnished room she now called home. The walls were bare, and the only sound was the ticking of an old clock. She stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror, her eyes hollow from the months of crying and sleepless nights. The excitement she had once chased seemed trivial now. She remembered Emeka's kindness, his patience, and the way he would always try to make her smile even on the toughest days. She had thrown it all away for fleeting thrills, and now she had nothing. The phone she had once used to communicate with Femi lay on the table, its screen dark. She hadn't heard from him in weeks, and deep down, she knew she never would again. Ada, too, faced a similar reckoning. She sat alone in what used to be her and Tund's living room, the silence almost unbearable, the echoes of their laughter, the warmth they had once had keep hunting them forever.